So my pleasure to welcome all of you to this public lecture. It's the third in the series that STIAS is partnered with ASSAf, and we're very privileged that as part of STIAS giving back, we partner with the South African Academy of Sciences in this respect. And it's very interesting that we have a former president of ASSAf in our midst, Robin Crew behind here, but also importantly that among ourselves we have the current vice president of the Academy of Sciences, who also happens to be the rector of Stellenbosch University. So thank you very much, Deresh, for making time. We know that it's a very busy time. If we go by the young people we see running in Stellenbosch, then we know how much work that you have on your hands. So thank you very much, and also thanks to Professor Deta von Vittel for accepting to introduce our speaker. So what I intend to do, one is, of course, the program is going to run that I'll do just a quick introduction of Deresh and Deta, and then the rector will speak to the Academy of Sciences, and then Deta will introduce our speaker, Professor Lindiwe Sibanda, this evening. So thank you for making time. And we're joking with her here that we'll check on her later to see whether she's still standing, because tomorrow she goes to Mpumalanga and then others, and eventually to Pretoria. But I think it's such a nice program that we can get a distinguished scholar moving from one university, connecting universities in a way on very important subjects. So as you all know, Professor Deresh is the 13th rector and vice chancellor of Stellenbosch University since April 2025, so it's already getting to a year. And having been deputy vice chancellor teaching and learning at the same university, is a preeminent scientist in the field of chemical engineering, and specifically in chemical thermodynamics and separation technology. He served as the DST NRF South African Research Chair for fluorine process engineering and separation technology until 2018. He boasts extensive board and governance experience, having served on several company and organization boards, and of course is currently serving as vice president of ASSAf. But I should also note that he does serve on the STIAS board of directors, and we're very happy that we have him on the governance structure. I'll also say one or two words on Deta. He's the Vice Dean for Research, Internationalization and Postgraduate Affairs in the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences at Stellenbosch University. He's a development economist and economic historian who has worked in the research on socioeconomic policy and on Laboratory for Economics of Africa's past. Please don't blame him for what the world is going on now within the economic field. He's actually trying to make sense of that and giving it a historical and contextual perspective. So thank you very much for that work. He's significantly known for his work on spatial inequalities in agriculture, and that kind of links with our current, our public lecture that we're going to have. And he is also a member of the Agriculture Economics Association of South Africa, which awarded him, the Agriculture Economics Association of South Africa awarded him the prize for the best journal article in 2024, and hopefully that we can speak to that. And then he's a research affiliate of the Institute of Labor Economics, a research fellow of the Global Labor Organization, and his affiliate, I don't know whether our friend hasn't gone to the Global Labor Organization to say it shouldn't exist, and he's affiliated with the Pan-African Scientific Research Council and sits on the Academy of Science of South Africa's Standing Committee on Science for Reduction of Poverty and Inequality. So we have two individuals that are playing a significant role within the academy in that space. And I would like on this note to invite Professor Duresh to speak to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kirumira. Good morning, colleagues, distinguished guests, members of the Academy of Science of South Africa, and friends of Stellenbosch University. It is a privilege for us to host today's ASSAf Distinguished Visiting Scholar Lecture here at STIAS and at Stellenbosch University. I think as Prof. Edward was saying, I'm wearing two hats this morning, one as the Vice President of ASSAf and the other as the Director and the Vice Chancellor of Stellenbosch University. But I'm speaking now as the Vice President of ASSAf. The Academy of Science of South Africa was established to ensure that science serves society, informs policy, strengthens democracy, and advances inclusive development. Through the ASSAf Act of 2001, our country affirmed its commitment to an academy that mobilizes the best scientific intellect across disciplines for national and global benefit. Now, the Distinguished Visiting Scholar Program embodies this mandate in action by bringing international or leading international scholars into dialogue with South Africa's research community. The program strengthens global connectivity within our national system of innovation and promotes meaningful science engagement. At a time when we face what ASSAf has termed a polycrisis, interconnected challenges spanning climate change, food insecurity, economic volatility, and social fragmentation, the need for integrated cross-sector thinking has never been greater. No single discipline, institution, or country can solve these challenges alone. It is therefore especially fitting that we welcome Professor Sibanda, a globally respected leader at the nexus of agriculture, climate, and sustainable food systems. Her work has shaped international policy platforms, informed corporate governance, strengthened global research networks, and amplified the voices of smallholder farmers across continents. And we are indeed privileged to be able to listen to her today. Stellenbosch University is deeply committed to this ethos of collaboration. Our Vision 2040 calls on us to be a research-intensive university that advances knowledge in service of society, and to do so through partnership, interdisciplinarity, and global engagement. Today's lecture reflects precisely that spirit. This lecture promises not only insight, but also provocation, challenging us to think beyond technical solutions and towards systemic transformation grounded in responsibility and moral imagination. Thank you very much to ASSAf for this important initiative, and equally to STIAS for the partnership with ASSAf in us hosting these series of lectures. Thank you very much.
Good morning to you, guests. It's a pleasure to be with you, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you Professor Lindiwe Sibanda. If you look at the subtitle of her speech, it actually reads like a short biography of Professor Sibanda, Science, Governance, and Planetary Stewardship, because she's combined each of these domains throughout her life's work, and she will share some of that with us today. So Professor Sibanda is a Zimbabwean animal scientist who's played a central role in agricultural and food policy formulation across the African continent, with the goal of maintaining a sustainable food system amid limited resources, but also importantly, climate volatility and many of the other factors that threaten the food system. Professor Sibanda holds a PhD from the University of Reading, and early in her career took up leading positions in key organizations at the heart of the food system, which includes both the policy domain, the agricultural domain, and also the food system itself, as we know it. She's done this both regionally, but also importantly, her reach has been very global beyond the African continent. For more than a decade, she headed the Food, Agriculture, and Natural Resources Policy Analysis Network, a truly pan-African think tank where she, among others, advocated for stronger budgetary commitments from national governments towards agriculture, and also at a multilateral level mobilized African civil society organizations to push for the inclusion of agriculture in the United Nations Framework for Climate Change Convention. Since then, she, among many other positions, has chaired the Integrated Partnership Board of the Consultative Group on International Agricultural Research, which is, of course, one of the most prominent multilateral research coordinating organizations on the globe, drawing together scientists, policymakers, and practitioners to solve some of the planet's most pressing problems. She's currently the co-chair of the Food Planet Prize, and her connection to academia remains strong and robust. She holds an extraordinary professorship at the University of Pretoria, where she plays a key role in the Arua Center of Excellence in Sustainable Food Systems. She's a fellow of the Robert Bosch Academy in Berlin. She sits on the board of the Geneva Science of Diplomacy Anticipator, and she also chairs the Council of Zimbabwe's National University of Science and Technology. Her rich experience continues to promote science diplomacy for the sake of research that has evidence-based impact, especially in the key decision-making organizations that rely on this research to make decisions. We anticipate a stimulating talk today that will help us to understand these matters better and to understand how the key role that the food system has to sustain society, to reduce poverty, to reduce inequality, and to ensure that children are well nourished and that adults have what they need. And also critically to ensure that it remains secure and resilient in these times that we live in as we face geopolitical tensions, climate risks, and also just volatility at a social level. We welcome you to Stellenbosch. We're very privileged to have you, and we thank you for the insights that you will share with us. Thank you very much. Let's welcome Professor Sibanda.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and to our Vice President of ASSAf. I think you've said it all. You set up the Academy for Science to Serve Society, for knowledge that informs policy, and for inclusive development. And I think that's what the world should be seized with at a time like this. So you were ahead of your time. Thank you for serving ASSAf, and thank you for inviting me and accepting me to be your distinguished scholar for this year. Colleagues, it's a busy time. You've all made the time to be here, and I appreciate you. I was joking to say I'm hoping this is a conversation and not a public lecture, because we all have a stake in the business of inclusive development, but more so in the business of food. But because we talk about sustainable food systems, it's important that we understand the system that we need to change, to adapt to the changing times. So, hence the topic, that I've chosen. I thought I should just say that I was here in 2015, and thanks to Google Photos, it reminded me 16 years ago, 2015 will be 11 years ago, this is what was happening. I'm sure you recognize Aldo there, and my friend who was big on climate issues at the time. So even then we're talking about climate change and food. But more important, those two guys there are my children, and I think I've done well. The younger one of the lot, they are not twins, they always argued about that, they are 12 months apart. The youngest of them all is about to complete his PhD in climate science at UPenn. And the brother is a filmmaker in New York. So yeah, so STIAS has had an impact in my life. I brought them here, not knowing that they will indulge in the delicacies that this region provides, the wine, and we ended up missing our flight back to Zimbabwe. So they owe me, they owe me. So they always say, Mom, don't talk about it. When you walk into a teenager's room and find they're still in bed and you're supposed to be picked up and they're wearing their shoes but fast asleep. That's the story that you live to tell. Thank you so much. So good to be back at STIAS. So, the sustainable food systems in an era of uncertainty. Uncertainty has become the order of the day. But science needs to prevail, even though science is under pressure. We need to engage our governments. We need to govern at local level up to the global level. But most important, we need to be good stewards of the source of knowledge, of the source of wisdom, which is the planet that we inhabit. That's what has informed the choice of this title. So, as we reflect, I will take you through just highlights of systemic instability. All of you can speak to that topic. The 4 agricultural revolutions that we have gone through and the one we are currently seized with, and the issue of wicked problems that we are dealing with, and they have remained stubborn and very difficult to change. Even though we know them, we understand the potential solutions, but we are still struggling to cross over. And then the cycle of policy, who participates and how we can bring together science, governance, and diplomacy, given the breakdown of the multilateral system, which we so much relied on, but now we realize that it is under pressure too. Then finally, I'll touch on planetary stewardship and what it can give us, and then a brief call to action. The picture speaks to a world that is unstable. If you just look at that orange, each one of us can tell a story of how we've been affected by the seismic changes that are happening daily in our lives. I did not choose to speak this week, but all of us know what we woke up to over the weekend. The geopolitical tensions, they are affecting the price of our fuel, they are affecting the price of food, they are disturbing travel, they are affecting tourism. It's unimaginable what we are going through, and yet we are still standing and we have to provide the solutions. The picture on the right depicts the effect of climate change on our own continent and the amount of resource we are still sitting on. Africa is the place of hope because we still have the largest amount of fertile soils that have not been put into production. So imagine if we could do that as good stewards, what we could do for the world. The cost of high prices of food on our health. Our health bill is high, and yet food offers the solution. If our food was nutrient dense, produced in a climate smart way, we would have a win-win situation, a healthy planet and healthy food. But what do we end up with? Expensive food, which has less fiber, high in sugar, not good for our bodies, but more important, pushing up the health bill, making the cost of insurance for our health difficult and beyond reach for the majority. It's a world that needs stability, and I believe food can provide an answer both to the economic challenges, the social challenges, and the environmental challenges that we face. And then the issue of fake news, fast speed of communication, social media, and just societal acceptance. Our youth are under pressure to belong because they are bombarded by news which is not validated, and yet we came through an era where what you heard had been sieved, filtered, and had to stand the test of the truth. But now, where is the moral compass to guide decision making? Where is the moral compass to decide or guide policy development? We just need to be good stewards of the resources. As I've said, food systems matter now more than ever because globally we are dealing with the challenge of malnourishment. Here in South Africa, close to 68% of the women are obese, and in terms of stunting for children, up to 22% of children are stunted. And when I grew up, stunting was really about height. It's not about how tall you are, it's about the development of your brain. If children who are born stunted do not get the nourishment to reverse the stunting in their first 5 years of life, that stunting becomes permanent. As we sit, Africa is the museum for stunted children. We're at about 30% in some countries. Can you imagine fast forward year 2050, where 30% of the adults will have stunted brains, 1 in 3. And that's the population from which we will choose our leaders. We have no choice. It will be irreversible, but they will be sitting in the thrones of power. Maybe it's already happened. And that's what we should be thinking about. When we see bad governance, we should start unpacking where we have come from. So food systems touch everything. They touch our health, they touch climate, because agriculture is one of the biggest emitters of greenhouse gases, and yet it can also be the biggest solution to mitigating climate change when done right. It touches on jobs, because no country has developed without improving its agriculture. It's the first rudder of development in the ladder where we'll talk about growth of an economy. Food is culture. That's why we name agri a culture. And finally, geopolitics. We have seen borders closing. We have seen food being used as a weapon for the disadvantaged and those who cannot access it. We have seen food being inaccessible for those who do not have the funds. So food systems are critical. But where have we come from? So I touch on the history of food. We went through the Neolithic phase, the revolution in the 10,000 BC, where our ancestors were domesticating plants and animals. They were shifting from being hunter-gatherers to farming, domesticated farming. We then had the British Agricultural Revolution. Why it's called British, I don't know, where they introduced crop rotation, selective breeding to improve the quality of the crops and animals. All this was to get more, and more. So we were thriving to feed a growing population, to have high-yielding varieties. In the 60s, the big thrust for the agricultural revolution. I'll go through those revolutions in picture form, where no one would want to do agriculture in that form. It's good that it remained in that era, but sad to say, we still have a population where the hand hoe is still the implement of choice, because they've not known a tractor, they have not known any other way of doing agriculture. We had the mechanization era, the rotation of crops, because people were moving into urbanization and there were fewer people in rural areas, so we needed the better toys. The biggest thrust was the Green Revolution, where in the 60s, Asia was nearly decimated by a drought. What happened was high-yielding varieties were developed by Global Center in Mexico under Norman Borlaug, who then took maize, wheat, and rice varieties to Asia. And thanks to good policies by the governments there, investments in irrigation and other infrastructure, they were able to eradicate the famine that was about to decimate the entire Asian population. Unfortunately, that revolution never reached Africa. Despite the high-yielding seed varieties, we have population that are still at 1/10 the potential of a seed variety, because either they cannot afford fertilizer, their soils are poor in quality, or they just don't have the know-how and the policy environment to produce better. The revolution has since continued. We are now in the 4th agriculture revolution. This is the best thing that has happened to agriculture. We have moved from agriculture to sustainable development goals. We've moved to an agriculture which is tamed sustainable food systems. I call this the best thing that happened in agriculture, because when I was trained, all the work we did stopped at the farm gate. We wanted better animals that are adapted to drought. We wanted better animals that are adapted to diseases locally. We wanted high-yielding, fast-growing animals that could go to the market at 2 years. We also wanted animals that were efficient users of food, and the felt conditions, the grasses, had to provide the right nutrients. Thanks to the United Nations General Secretary, who in 2021, for the first time, convened a United Nations General Assembly that focused on food systems. And that meant we no longer talk agriculture, we talk farm to fork, farm to the table. What that means is that we are no longer talking about an agriculture that's about high yield. We are talking about an agriculture that feeds the soil, because that's where the food comes from. We are also talking about an agriculture that feeds the body, because it's not about a commodity that we produce which has high commodity prices. It's about food which nourishes the body. Most important, we're talking about an agriculture that gives back to the planet. So sustainable food systems moved us from just the farm of high yields, farm to the table, where we nourish people. It moved us from the farm to nourishing the planet. And that wedding cake for agriculture to celebrate that conference talks about food and agriculture that is connected to all 17 Sustainable Development Goals. No matter any one of them, in agriculture and sustainable food systems, we touch on the economy, we touch on society, and we touch on the biosphere. But what's more exciting in this 4th revolution is the era of digital and genomic technologies like AI. Because the agriculture in the old was all guesswork in a way. But now we have to use the latest technologies to understand and have better precision of the soil quality, the seeds that we produce, and their implications on our bodies and the planet at the same time. So this is the data-driven era for agriculture. So for most who are outside agriculture, this then means everybody is connected to sustainable food systems. Agriculture was a technical field for the scientists who studied agriculture science. But sustainable food systems is for all of us because we all are the stewards of the planet. We all depend on food. We all thrive to have healthy bodies. But most important, we have a stake in the business of food. I just did that picture to just show the amount of science that's now going and AI into food systems. Now let me touch on policy processes. One thing I've been told, because I've been dealing a lot with policy, previously the issue of policy was the domain of agriculture economists where I was trained. And I've even been invited to Agricultural Economic Society meetings where I'm told, you don't have to pay because you're an economist. And then I say, no, I'm an animal scientist. So when I crossed over to that field, what I discovered is that it's a messy process, and that's why they want to keep it to the elite. And yet, policy development is for all of us. If we want to take anything to scale, it's either you increase the number of people who are engaged or you influence policy and open up a conducive environment for growth. Now, policy is messy. It is messy because it involves cabinet, it involves parliament, it involves multiple ministries, not just agriculture. It involves the private sector, civil society, the funders. But the whole cycle of developing policy is about solving societal problems so that you create a conducive environment. For us in animal sciences, we say policy development is as messy as sausage making. We love the sausages, but if you go behind a butcher's shop to see how they are made and what goes in there, you'd never eat one. So get brave if you want to engage in the policy development process because you will burn. But one thing I learned is always keep a distinction between policy and politics. Policy is evidence-based. And politics is a game of options because you want to choose who's going to win and who's going to lose, and they can never be a game for everybody to win. The politician will decide who should win at any one point in time. And that's where, as academics, we have suffered the challenge of attribution. That I've been to the president's office, I've been to the minister's office, I've been to parliament, engaged the portfolio committee, and yet they go and make what we call wrong decisions. They are not wrong. They have to please their constituency that they need mileage from at that point in time. When your time comes, you can then say, yes, I told them, but never think the advice we generate from the scientific publications, from the analysis, will always reign. So stay on the policy side if you don't want to be bent. Go on the politics side if you're brave. That's my advice. Now, because our communities are always left behind, here I'm talking about our smallholder farmers who produce our food, our rural dwellers. One of the best things that I've worked with is theater for policy action, whereby really you want to demystify policy. You want to tell people if you have a problem, university should be your partner in generating the evidence of unpacking your problem and potential solutions. But because we have an oral culture, most of the things cannot be communicated in written word. So when I was working with FANAPAN, which is hosted here in South Africa, but working Africa-wide, we devised Theatre for Policy Advocacy, which was a tool whereby our communities dialogue through song and dance, and you get academics to document the challenges they face. You then bring in your media, your parliamentarians, to just have an ear. And the sad thing is that most of the people we have trained had lost the ear for hearing the message behind those rural stories. When you go as a visitor to a rural community announced, they will greet you in song and dance. It's only when you understand the language that you will be able to communicate and get the challenge they are facing that they're expecting you to solve. So we devised a tool for policy action, and I'm happy to say we have it on record that we're able to change a couple of policies in Mozambique. They had a challenge of women who were producing tomatoes. Their men would take them to the town center and never come back home with the money. So because of that intervention, the market was brought to the people and women could get their money direct. It's simple things, but if that message is not in the national newspaper, if that message does not have the right messenger, and the right messenger is always the person most affected by the problem, not the researcher. The researcher helps to package the information. The journalists, the media help to disseminate, to create a storm, and you need the right platform, a parliament that will receive that message and say, yes, the laws have to be changed. So we're able to coin that and bring the village to the national level through different media. But there I underline the role of academic accompaniment in solving societal problems. Find the right messenger, package the message, which requires the scientists, the researcher, and then find the platforms for engagement so that the message can reach the right corridors of power. So there I highlight the process that we generated, and I'm happy to say it's still being applied in many African countries. We've demystified the issue of policy development, which is not just for the elite, but it's been brought down to rural communities. We worried at a time about linking local to global, but thanks to social media, thanks to AI now, we are fully connected. The challenge still remains: who safeguards those messages? How true are they? And how do we validate the messages that we get? That too is the role for the academic institutions to help us get there. I want to touch on the global wicked problems. I've touched on malnutrition, climate change, and I'm happy to be speaking at STIAS, a center that was established for transdisciplinary challenges where we bring different faculty to address a wicked problem. These are problems that don't sit in one government ministry. They are socially complex, they are interdependent, they are not stable, they are always shifting. You cannot go to a minister of nutrition. You cannot go to a minister of climate change. It's rare in any country. So which door do you knock on when you want to change or talk about the policy challenges we face? That's the definition of a wicked problem. So unless we devise the platforms, unless we empower everybody, not just the educated elite, but those most affected by the problems into this discourse, we will forever be challenged in addressing these wicked problems. They have unforeseen consequences, but the end, they affect all of us. Go back to the issue of stunted children. You may say, in my family, no one is stunted, but your next head of state may be a stunted person. So what are we doing as countries? What are we doing globally to address these wicked problems? So there, I've given some of the potential solutions in climate change. We need to be adapting, mitigating, building resilience, putting more finance into climate-smart agriculture. My first introduction into the UNFCCC, United Nations, negotiations on climate change was in 2008. It wasn't until 2025 that agriculture was embraced as a working group in the climate negotiations. It just shows how slow the process is to even accept science. We could have given up because all they were seized with is fossil fuel. but agriculture is responsible for up to 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions, and nobody wanted anything to do with it except for plant more trees. A recent paper has been published by Johan Rockström, who is really the father of the planetary boundaries, and there he speaks about a potential solution that was known many decades ago in the 60s, conservation agriculture, where we talk about crop rotation, we talk about leaving sufficient cover on soil, we talk about rotating your crops, sufficient cover and minimum tillage. And he has recently proved that if that practice had to be adopted at scale, it could generate up to 0.8 gigatons of carbon per hectare per year, and it could save up to 70% of the fuel that we use. Simple answers based on science. What we need is scale. Can you imagine if we equipped everybody with basic messages on what science can do for our climate, what science can do for nourishing our body, where we would be? But the pace is slow. I show the agriculture pathways for improving nutrition. I've touched on the climate change one. We need to start at household level. There are some households who produce the food. There are some who need income to access the food. But what I know is 80% of the food we eat in Africa goes through the hands of a woman. Can you imagine if those women are empowered to produce or to buy the right food, to prepare a nourishing diet for their family, but most important, to be able to understand the power of agriculture, nutrition, and food systems in the role of development from household level to national level. But in most cases, we've made agriculture a technical issue. If you are not trained in agriculture sciences, you don't have this knowledge. So how best can we bring in those we have left behind into the discourse of sustainable food systems? How do we empower them to govern at local level? How do we empower them to protect the planet? And how do we make sure that everybody is a steward of the planet? I've touched on these statistics. We are moving from soil to farming to markets to diets to our own health and the health of the planet. That's what we should all be seized with. There's also the critical debate that is going on globally, which has been anti-livestock. But one thing I know as an animal scientist is that there's no better protein than animal source food. Yes, we can all go green, but 40 grams per day to a child in the first 5 years will reverse the stunting or prevent it. And yet, we have communities that have no choice, that rely on just their cattle, their milk, the blood, and we are pushing an anti-livestock agenda. This is where science has to speak up. This is where society, the history and the origins and the culture on food has to speak up rather than embrace a fashion that would leave us with more problems that we can not deal with. I'm speaking here about the Eat Lancet recommendations. I was part of the Eat Lancet Global Report, which really globally has a position. It's pushing for more plant-rich foods and diverse foods. But it does not say don't eat meat. It means we have to be responsible stewards. So let's not misrepresent science when we want to extract what we want to push as lobbyists. An advocate will use evidence, a lobbyist will use emotion, and we have to distinguish between the two. I've been lucky in terms of governance that I was a governor for the Consultative Group of International Agricultural Research, which is a $1 billion outfit that is researching on all food groups in 10,000 staff in over 80 countries. And the joy with that is that we've been able to look at sustainable food systems from farm to fork and how we can transform food systems in an era of climate change. A lot of research has come out of that. I also want you to look at the Food Planet Prize. It's a $1 million prize that we issue annually. It's online. And there we are looking at technologies that have potential to be taken to scale to save human health and the health of our planet. So I encourage you to submit whatever work you're doing where you see that this has potential to make a difference. The last prize we gave out for Africa was the refrigeration process out of Nigeria, where they are cutting on food loss and waste. What we know is if food loss and waste was a planet, it would be the third. If it was a country, it would be the third biggest emitter of greenhouse gases. So if we can reduce our food loss and waste, we will reduce greenhouse gases that are coming out of the food loss and waste. And one of the Sustainable Development Goals, 12.3, speaks to reducing food loss and waste by 50% by 2030, all in an effort to reduce the impact of food loss and waste on climate change. An interesting outfit I'm involved with is GESDA. I encourage you to look at and also to get your students to submit for bursaries to attend our annual meeting. GESDA stands for Geneva Science Diplomacy Anticipator Platform. There we ask the question, what will the world be like by 2050 and beyond? And what science should we be doing now to inform the world we are working towards in the different disciplines? For agriculture is, where will the food come from? What is the food of the future? And what research should we be doing now? I think for most we've been seized with solving the problems of the past and the current problems, but we need to be positioning for feeding the future. So what research should we be doing? And that's where the anticipator radar is very exciting and cuts across many disciplines. At the National University of Science and Technology in Zimbabwe, I am the chair of council. And one thing that's really been exciting for me is the issue of moving from academia that do teaching, research, and society engagement to a push by the government for commercialization and industrialization. Each university is being asked to choose an industry that they will impact and transform. They will choose commercial projects where they generate patented technologies and transform into business opportunities that are led by students. It's been exciting to see our own university students going into all sorts of things. One of the best one for me was a helmet that was designed by one of our students, which has a dictator for measuring gas levels for our miners underground. So that's a societal problem, and this helmet is for use by artisanal small-scale miners. And I'm sure you assist with a lot of that in South Africa. You buy a helmet with a little torch as you go underground, because most have died going up there, and you can get a beep when the gas levels are no longer conducive for human life. So it's things like that. They are producing a lot of products that previously were imported, but universities are now being encouraged to fill the supermarkets with locally produced products. And it's been exciting being part of that journey. Another part which is not reflected there is my life with the global Nestle board. And whenever I'm asked, why would a scientist sit on a board of a private big company? I say, well, if we don't sit in those corridors, who's going to make sure they are doing the right thing? And one thing that I've enjoyed is this is a company that spends $1 billion a year on research and development. So there's a lot of science in there, and it's always good as a scientist to be in those corridors where science is converted into commercial products. My last bit is the stewardship role. How do we bring everybody who has a stake in food to be a steward? I had the opportunity of being housed at the Robert Bosch Academy in the last 6 months from June to December last year. And there I'm working on a food systems practitioner certification. I think we've made the business of agriculture and food systems so technical that those most affected, our rural women, our farmers, are so afraid and find it difficult to get the knowledge they need. Can you imagine a world if after 40 years as an engineer in a different field altogether, engineers usually are solving societal problems. As a nurse, you suddenly want certification in food systems. We have not opened up for other stewards who want to be part of us. Can you imagine a world where we have short courses from our universities where we just teach about soil management? You walk in, you get your certification, and you become a practitioner. So this is why, for me, creating shared value aligns with the business of stewardship. We mobilize money, we mobilize business, we build resilience, and we bring multiple actors to solve the wicked problems we are faced with. Let's not make our problems executive. Let's bring every practitioner to be a steward. I unpack creating shared value. It's a concept that was developed out of Harvard University, but when you really unpack it, you see it's an opportunity for everyone to have a stake in solving the societal challenges, the wicked problems that we've been struggling with. What's the role of universities in all that? Universities are trusted entities. Let's ride on that trust. We're the platforms for innovation and solution. We are seen as neutral conveners, safe space for dialogue. And we are the platforms for intergenerational transition, for passing that knowledge. How are we using that clout to make sure we are the go-to for solutions? I once came across a head of state who said, when our university is closed, we don't feel the pain, closed because of political upheavals, because we have never seen how they benefit us. Let's rise up to the occasion and show them what we can do for society. So what I've been working on is what I call the CGIAR Sustainable Food Systems Academy, which I'm hoping various universities can be part of as we create shared value. Let's target a community, let's target a constituency that we empower with knowledge. Short courses, 5 days. And this has been informed by the German system that I had the opportunity to interface with, the German certification vocational training system, where you can leave your entire profession and start something totally new because you are passionate about it and create a livelihood out of it. In our areas, that's always been seen as people with no background or solid background, uneducated. Yet, that's the movement we will need to transform our food systems. I share with you the highlights of the academy. We cannot transform food systems alone. Every human being is a stakeholder. Every human being must have the know-how to participate. Let's not make agriculture and sustainable food systems a business of the elite. My call to action is that the few experts we have trained will not move the needle. We need stewards who understand the game, are empowered, and are emotionally connected. Let's not nourish the problem. Let's build a movement that has the talent to restore health. Intergenerational wealth that we have to pass on, because all these are seeds of change that we are planting. I know people have doubted whether I'm a farmer, and they're asking me, with all this, what do you do? My heart is at the farm, that's my team, and I do livestock and tomato and avocado under greenhouse, and that's my happy place. Let me leave you with just a few challenges. We are dealing with uncertainty. We can list the long list of uncertainties. We are dealing with governance challenges where we've left others to govern yet all of us are governors if we use evidence to move the needle and change policies. We are dealing with the issue of stewardship, which is a moral call. We have to be good stewards. Can we do it under deep uncertainty? Yes, we can. We have the tools. Are we able to act not as extractors, but as stewards? I say yes, we can. And science should rise up to the occasion. I thank you.
This on. Thank you, Professor Sibanda. You can stay at the front there. Good morning, everyone. My name is Christoph Poe. I'm the STIAS Senior Program Manager. And we have some time for a Q&A. First of all, let me just say thank you, Professor Sibanda, for such a comprehensive overview of sustainable food systems, where we've come from and where we need to aim at. And thanks, moreover, for doing it in such an inspiring way. We really are inspired by your words. I wanted to acknowledge a large online audience who is following the lecture on YouTube, on the STIAS YouTube channel. Thank you all for joining us. The lecture will be housed on the STIAS YouTube channel after this, so please share it with your networks and friends afterwards. So we'd like to open for any comments and questions from the audience here. I see 3 hands. We'll start with Abdul.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your talk. I think you gave us a very positive sound. So I don't want to go completely negative, but I have a specific question in terms of African. I've read recently about very specifically African forms of agriculture. I don't remember the name of the person, but it was a scholar from Nigeria who was saying that, the particular type of, which you called, the second revolution, has actually destroyed a lot of, farming land. And he's suggesting that, I think one of the points that he mentioned was the idea of having several crops growing at the same time, at least those kind of solutions. Mm-hmm. But I was thinking about specifically, is there space for doing research on agriculture that has been developed, speaking about, we're in Africa, to speak about African forms of farming and what that would contribute. Because you seem to be going much more in a technological direction, which I think we have following this particular method has left much more, a lot of food in some hands and much less in others. And I think connected to that, I wanted to ask the question, you never mentioned the word capitalism here. Capitalism really has moved, agriculture, from the 17th or 18th century with a particular result that we have seen here. So how do you propose to, to do away with the deleterious, with the negative effects of capital, and how capital works as such for the few only?
That's 10 questions in one. I'll be brief. So your question on, I'll turn it around. I said there were 4 agricultural revolutions that we went through, that we've gone through. The Green Revolution has not happened in the entire Africa. And you are saying that is bad agriculture because it's led to a lot of damage in terms of high fertilizer use and not nourishing the soil. And that's what people are trying to address now. This then begs the question, what should an African green revolution look like? I'm happy to say that Asia itself is moved away from green revolution to what they call an evergreen revolution. In that case, we are not growing for more. We are not breeding for high yield. We're breeding for nourishing the soil and people. The whole world is now looking at that. that touches partly on your question of capitalism. When we commoditized food, we needed more maize for the stock exchange. We needed rice to trade as commodity. We didn't care what type of maize because part of it was going to feed cattle. It wasn't for nourishing people. So quantity was the currency for more income. But when you look at sustainable development goals, you're looking at economic gain, social gain, environmental gain, which is why they were born in 2015 after realizing that capitalism was driving the world. In the world of agriculture, it was more yield. More yield meant more damage to the soil. You are sitting just behind a lawyer there who tells me he has just done a law on soil protection. That's the biggest thing for transdisciplinary benefits to agriculture. We have mined our soils to the extent that the food they produce doesn't nourish the body. Because of that, we are over-fertilizing to replace the nutrients we have moved. In over-fertilizing, you need science to measure with precision what you've taken out, what you need to replace. But not everybody is privy to that science. What ends up happening is we buy anything on the shelf called fertilizer, we pour it at oversupply, wrong time, wrong quantity, wrong delivery mechanism. 80% is washed into our rivers, pollutes the rivers, doesn't nourish the soil, demines the soil, and we say we're in agriculture. Agriculture does need technology. And the technology that it needs is science-driven because you have to understand the quality of your soil, the quality of crop that is right for that soil, and the nutrients that are required. But unfortunately, that is a public good that most governments cannot afford. The end game is private sector, which can afford to do its own research, generate the technologies, privatizes the knowledge. So on large-scale farms, they will produce to the quality of seed that they have. On small farms, when I say small, I mean smallholder-owned rural farms. You just do your traditional agriculture. So you're doing more damage and getting yes yield, but also damaging the environment. So science is the answer, but it has to be a public good. For it to be there, we have to finance research and development at scale through government and large-scale public support. So this is the fight. If we win the loss and damage agenda at the UN negotiations, there will be payment for the damage that's been done. But that money has not seen the light of day. Have I answered you? We can continue, yes. But we need an evergreen, not a green revolution that's for quantity. We need sustainable food systems.
Great. Thank you. Next person behind.
Thanks very much, Prof, for your talk. Very interesting. Yeah, I'm thinking of our education, because you're talking about the university being part of how we can really go to food system, sustainable food system. And when I teach, I'm teaching planetary health, so sometimes I realize how it's very important that education can drive the food system stewardship, you know, but it's quite difficult that it's not well spread through different curricula in the universities. So do we have any strategies of how we can bring this type of message of food system, sustainable food system across different disciplines that can also help to bring everyone to be part of, as you're saying, food system is for everything. Thanks.
Thank you. So how do we bring everybody who has a stake in the business of food? Is by breaking the silos. How do we break the silos? By learning to communicate better. How do we learn to communicate better? Not all researchers can talk simple English. We are quick to go to our jargon and prove to others that we know the subject matter well. And yet, if we want to break the silos, we need to bring confidence that I have a stake in your planetary health. What is planetary health? Yes.
Thanks very much. So as I can just put it straight to the words, planetary health as the health of the planet. So because of the uncertainty with the climate change and all the ecological drivers, not only climate change, global warming, air pollution, loss of biodiversity, taking it from the drivers that come to leading, different underlying conditions. For example, our excess of consumption of the natural resources, through all the process of those ecological driving, leading to proximate causes, mediating factors that are embedded into that leads to different diseases. So planetary health is that framework of understanding that the disease that we have today, it's not only, it's like the head of the iceberg. So beyond that, there is quite a lot of things that we need to understand for us to unpack the issue of disease today. So this is planetary health, if I can say it in that way. So the health of our civilization today. Thanks.
So my father is 94 years. So I've spent the past year learning how to communicate to him. Very clever, way ahead. Half the time he knows more than me. But when you hear him say repeat, you know you've missed the train. Not because he's dumb, but because you are not hitting the right notes. So my advice is let's communicate better. Let's touch the right nerve that makes everybody want to engage and believe they can provide a solution. And that's what breaking the silos. But I think we've always been trained to be experts. And experts means you use sophisticated language, and yet we're talking bread and butter issues. So that would be my advice. I just want to bring the picture of my grandmother's farm, smallholder farm, rural in Zimbabwe in the 70s. She had a rainbow revolution. On her farm, she had her free-ranging chickens, some goats. One was slaughtered every school holiday, which means 3 a year. 2 dairy cows, which we milked all the time and drank our milk, our tea with milk. She had pulses, she had brown sorghum, she had sugar cane, she had cowpeas, she had a patch of maize, and all that provided food for the family that we took to the city when we went back to school in the city. But more important, she made sure there was a diversity of crops to feed the soil because they complement each other. And she also sold the excess. Now came the green revolution. Wipe out everything, grow one crop, because there is a commodity price. That's what reversed our care for the soil. If you got more maize per hectare, you were guaranteed $300 per hectare, per ton, which you don't get from the diversity, but you get to nourish the soil and your family. So that's now the challenge. Large-scale farms can afford it because they will nourish the soil. But on a small holding where you don't get enough yield and you've gone for one crop, you don't get the 1 ton that gives you $300. You've depleted the soil nutrients and deprived your family of nutrients from a diverse diet. That's the challenge we are facing. I hope that example explains it better.
Thank you very much, Prof, for your for the education from your presentation. Last week I was in Harare and I was driving with a colleague to the airport, and the colleague was saying that in Zim people don't waste any empty spaces. As we could see, there were a lot of crops being grown around, and I think this really falls into what you have just been saying about the farm and the different crops. I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts? Because my concern is that it would seem that we are, the source of the seeds, the seed bank, that relates to subsistence farming seems to be on the decline. And, you know, I'm from Botswana, and, you know, when you look at sorghum as a staple food, and you realize that, you know, the ordinary villager probably cannot have the seeds that they can grow for them to be able to, you know, have food from their small plot. You know, what is your comment on that? What are your thoughts, and what do you think can be done to address this issue? Because, I mean, people talk about sustainable agriculture, sustainable crops, sustainable food, but other people talk about food sovereignty, and I'm just wondering, how can we address this area?
Thank you. So, talk about Zim and them not wasting any land. So I always say that for my generation, agriculture is in our blood, because every school holiday without fail, 3 months at school in the city, you're in the city because your parents work as general hands or whatever, teachers or nurses. Without fail, you are shipped to the rural area, which is your second home, where your grandmother and grandfather live, where your parents grew up. And only later I realized we're shipped there to provide free labor to our grandparents, but more important, to enjoy quality time with the extended families. So I come from a family where grandmother had 6 children. So second day holidays, we are in a bakkie, 14 children from the 6 who are in the city, families, under one hut, all sleeping on the floor. 4 a.m. up to the field, we go cropping. That's when I learned my agriculture. So it becomes part of your blood, that's what you know. On the way back at 11, when it gets hot, you pick up firewood, you collect water, you carry it on your head, and you come and prepare the meal. 4 p.m., it's cooler, you go back, come back at 6 and eat and sleep and enjoy the rural stories. So I think it builds some form of resilience and love for agriculture, such that when people are in the city working now, because they cannot afford or there's free land, the first thing they think of, don't waste this land, put it under crop. The idea is that you generate all the food you eat per household from your hand. You only buy what you cannot produce. That's what was ingrained in us. Now, come to the issue you've mentioned about seed. Seed is a big business, close to 4 billion, I think, in Africa. It used to be the figure for quality seed. There's nothing wrong with hybrid seed. Zimbabwe, where I come from, was one of the first adopters in the 60s of hybrid seed, which is high quality seed, which moves you from 100 kilograms per hectare maize yield to up to 10 tons. The 10-ton club is a common play in Zimbabwe, where farmers will thrive not to use just good seed, right fertilizer, right agronomic practices to yield up to the maximum potential for that seed. But there are certain crops that have been left out of that commercial commodity. The commodities got a lot of investments to the extent that we developed centers like CIMIT in Mexico is the global center for maize and wheat. So all their business is to produce good quality seed for the whole world. We have the rice center, IRI, in the Philippines, the same, it's a CGIAR center. In Nairobi, we have the International Livestock Research Institute. All these were centers that were funded globally to produce high quality seed, right? But there are crops, food crops that we grew up enjoying that have not made it to that rank. Only now we've gone back to find they are the answer to building resilience. Why? They are climate smart, they can withstand harsh climate environment, and they are nutrient dense. But because they had no commodity value, no public funds went into developing them to be high yielding. So a new initiative under Kerry Fowler, I had the opportunity to be the inaugural co-chair, but I've stepped down, which is now looking at bringing back those crops like okra back to the table. But there's no center that specializes on okra. It was thrown away as this is an African food. And yet we find maize came from Mexico, we embraced and loved. And if we had gone for those indigenous crops, developed them locally, they would be high yielding, but we've made them delicacies that are seasonal because they're in short supply. They were not bred to improve the yield, and we only enjoy them seasonally for 1 month when you go to the village. So there's a new initiative to say, Africa, wake up, look at what was given to you. You have not embraced, improved, and invest in improving those forgotten. They are actually called orphan crops or grandmother crops. That's how derogatory we've become. Yet, kale has become and fonu has become the best food in America, imported from Africa. Fonu is from West Africa. These are now delicacies that if you have this in your meal, you're really high class. And yet our grandparents used to grow this and we never improved it. So the onus is on us to invest on what we're endowed with, improve quality, and introduce the palate to our children. Because for most of those forgotten foods, our children say yucky when you put them. But we have the food scientists. Why can't I get it from a supermarket? Because they require 5 hours of cooking most of those foods. But if we modernize them, improve their quality, and put them on the supermarkets, there is a potential for big market for Africa. So it's not all bad what the capitalists did in improving seed. Let's copy that our own way and improve our traditional food.
That's a great call to action. Yes.
Thank you. So as I understand, you are also looking into indigenous crops that are not really developed. The other side, you have crops that are modified. Firms like Monsanto, which are, of course, in that capitalistic system. Are they looking out for the human in the world, or are they looking for the investors? And so my question is this a combined story looking for the local produce? And for instance, I know just outside Stellenbosch there's that Sustainability Institute looking into fynbos and other crops that are now developed and are really very promising, but they don't have any surface to grow on, and so it will be remaining quite small. What's your take on initiatives like that?
Well, we started from capitalist invasion, we are back there. So I always say, no one has the knowledge is not embodied for the protected few. It's for all of us. It should be a public good. When those who want business develop a technology and put it out there, the choice is mine. Do I want a GMO crop or am I anti? But don't go GMO as a country if you don't have the biosafety protocols in place. So that's what we demand from our government. But in terms of hybrids, not all of them are genetically modified. The hybrid is really improving yield based on standard biological practices. So it's different. But for farmers, give them the choice, educate them about each choice, and let them be able to choose. For those crops that you say have no space for cultivation, I don't believe there is no space. What there isn't is a market. Once there is a pull on the market, we go and find the place to grow. Every farmer will want to grow a commodity that has a market. Every household would want to grow a nutrient-dense crop because they want to feed their families. So it's back to information sharing, but market is the biggest driver for growth of any crop because you are doing it for business, but let's bring in the doing it for nutrient density as well and for climate smartness. That's what my message is.
We'll have one more question.
Okay, thanks, Prof. Let me come back again. From what you are saying, I would like to know, in Africa, do we need a resilient food system or sustainable food system? Thanks.
Okay, a quick answer to that. Sustainability is about economic, social, and environmental. You feed the pocket, you feed the community, you also feed the planet. That's sustainability. But resilience accepts the fact that there will always be an external environment that will hit you. Talk about a flood, talk about a drought. When you are resilient, you should be able and be equipped to bounce back better. So you need both. You need to equip people with technologies for resilience, because when a drought comes, treat it like snow in countries that have snow. Don't say, I won't go to work because last year I had a drought, so I'll stop farming. You should be able to say, I'll invest in irrigation. I'll invest in drought-tolerant seeds, so that when the next drought comes, I plant drought-tolerant seeds, I use drip irrigation, and I make sure that versus the farmers who don't have that technology, I remain standing when they fall. But when you farm sustainably, it means every day you are not mining the soil, you are giving back to the soil. Every day you are looking at the quality of crops and the rotation system that gives back to the soil. But you are also looking at optimum yields, not maximum yields. Because when you go maximum, that puzzle, that matrix falls because something suffers. But when it's optimum yield, optimum soil health, optimum nutrient density, you balance the equation. So you need both.
I want to thank everyone who attended the lecture. Thank you for the questions. Professor Sibanda, you told us that food touches on everything, and that really has come through strongly. Thank you. I also wanted to thank ASSAf, Tebogo. It was lovely to see you again. Professor Ramjugana, thank you for the opening words, and Dieter, who had to leave, for the introduction. We have lunch, so talk about food. There's a meal prepared for us. We can use the tables in the foyer here, so please do join us for lunch. A final thanks to the audience who joined us online, and most importantly, Professor, to you. Thank you for the lecture.
Thank you very much.